Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for watching our Hartley House 101 presentation. My name is Caroline, pronouns she, her, and I am one of the community engagement and prevention coordinators with Hartley House. And I'll allow my co-facilitator to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Allie Albrecht, pronouns she, her, and I am also a community engagement and prevention coordinator here at Hartley House.
Thank you, Allie. And just a little content warning before we get into tonight's presentation. The conversation today might be difficult to hear and talk about. So if at any point you have any overwhelming feelings or emotions come up, please feel free to call our 24/7 hotline number that will be listed at the bottom of each slide after this title slide. And that is completely free and confidential. So with that, let's get started. There we go. So the mission of Hartley House is to end intimate partner violence, sexual assaults, human sex trafficking, and child abuse, and to provide survivors with safety, shelter, and supportive services. So Hartley House is a nonprofit organization located in Frederick, Maryland, that was established in 1979. It was created after a local group of women recognized the need for emergency housing for women who were survivors of domestic violence. Since then, Hartley House has expanded to become Frederick County's only service center for all victims and survivors of intimate partner violence, sexual assault, child abuse, and human trafficking. While we still have that emergency shelter, we also have the 24/7 hotline, which I discussed on the previous slide. We do crisis intervention appointments, individual and group counseling sessions, legal services, an intervention program for abusers, and community engagement and prevention programs like the one that you're watching today. So thank you again for being here. So we're going to talk more about the specific terminology that we're going to be using in today's presentation. So domestic violence and intimate partner violence are two terms that mean the same thing, but they can elicit two different understandings of the term. So while domestic violence is more commonplace language, it does evoke this idea of a woman being abused by their husband. And so this can reinforce the idea that only cisgender women can be survivors of intimate partner violence. And we know that this is not the case. Whereas when we use the term intimate partner violence or dating violence, it's more expansive and better reflects the reality of this form of violence, because survivors aren't just cisgender women, and you don't have to be married in order to be in a violent situation when it comes to dating violence. You can be with an individual for one night or for decades, and violence can still ensue. So for this time, we're going to be using intimate partner violence. And if you follow us on social media or our newsletter, an individual who gets our newsletters, then you'll see we also use the same language as well and throughout our nonprofit. So now we're going to be talking about who exactly we serve and support. So the first victimization that we're going to be talking about today is intimate partner violence. And intimate partner violence is defined as a pattern of abusive behavior towards a current or previous intimate partner. Now, two specific key terms that I want to reinforce here is that it is a pattern of abuse and that this abuse can occur between a current or previous partner. So within relationships, and healthy relationships, I should add, we are not 100% our best selves all of the time. And that's completely okay because we are human. However, what turns into unhealthy and potentially abusive behavior is when there is a pattern of disrespect towards a partner. And then the other key term I want to bring in is that it can be a current or previous partner. A lot of times individuals think, oh, well, if that partnership or intimate relationship isn't occurring currently, that means intimate partner violence cannot still occur. But that's not the case. What we see in research and within our nonprofit is that a lot of survivors still endure violence after the relationship has ended. And often that violence does escalate after that individual leaves the relationship. So it's always important to remember that and to safety plan. And you can do that by calling our 24-hour hotline if you plan on leaving an abusive partner. And then below in the bullet points, these are just different forms of intimate partner violence. And I'll go through them really quickly. There can be verbal abuse, and this looks like yelling at someone, screaming at someone, maybe putting them down or making fun of them in front of other individuals to humiliate them. This can look like physical violence, and this is often what people typically think of when they think of domestic violence. It could be the abuser punching, hitting a survivor, but it can also look like damaging the survivor's property. This can look like emotional abuse or mental abuse, which can be interchangeable. And this can look like making fun of an individual, like I talked about before. It can look like threats, saying things like, well, I'm going to hurt you or your social support network if you don't do X, Y, and Z. It can look like sexual manipulation, and this is any unwanted sexual touching or coercion. It can look like intimidation, similar to threats, intimidating an individual by saying things like, I will harm myself if you don't act in this certain way. But it can also be just the abuser's body language or even just an intimidating look that signifies to the survivor, oh, I've done something wrong or I shouldn't have behaved in that way, which is totally unacceptable, but that may be how the survivor is feeling and how the abuser has portrayed the situation to the survivor. It could look like financial harassment, where abuser may withhold money or resources to the survivor, making them feel as though they can't leave the situation, or else they, may not be able to afford food or have a roof over their head. This can look like stalking or following a survivor digitally or in person. And then lastly, this can be isolation or making it so that a survivor can't hang out with other individuals, whether that be family members and other friends. And then next, we're going to go on to another victimization that we work with, and that is survivors of sexual violence. So sexual violence is an umbrella term that can mean many different things, such as sexual assault, abuse, or harassment. And so sexual violence is a wide range of sexual behaviors, actions, and activities that someone does not or is unable to consent to. And we want to make sure that in any situation that consent is explicitly stated and that it is continually asked and received during any form of sexual behavior, action, or activity. And so you may be asking, well, how often does this happen? And unfortunately, the research shows us that 1 in 6 women, 1 in 33 men, and nearly 1 in 2 trans individuals have been the survivor of an attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. So we aren't sharing this information to scare anyone, but it is to show the realities that this form of abuse occurs very often and often can co-occur with other forms of victimization that we work with, such as intimate partner violence, and even child abuse, which we'll talk about in later slides. And so the next victimization that we will be talking about is human trafficking, and specifically human sex trafficking. And so sex trafficking is a form of abuse in which traffickers use force, fraud, or coercion to control survivors for the purpose of engaging in commercial sex acts, or in any situation where a person performing the act is under the age of 18. So if an individual is under the age of 18 and they are performing a sex act, that is considered human sex trafficking. Whereas if they are 18 or older, that force, fraud, or coercion piece has to be brought into it. And so survivors are often trafficked by intimate partners, family members, jobs, or individuals posing as benefactors. So oftentimes when people think of human sex trafficking, they think of videos like Taken. But what we see in Frederick County, and yes, human sex trafficking does occur in Frederick County, what we often see is individuals posing as someone who is a loving person towards that survivor. Maybe they gain the trust of that survivor, and then they coerce that survivor or ask them to do one small sex act that may seem unsubstantial to the survivor. It may seem, oh, well, I'm doing this for this other person because I love them and they asked me and it's not a big deal. But over time, the traffickers will ask for more and more egregious acts. And at that point, the survivor is often so tied to the trafficker that they feel like they can't say no, or the trafficker is using other forms of violence towards the survivor, and therefore they feel as though they can't get out. Maybe the trafficker is being physically abusive or emotionally abusive to the survivor, and they feel as though doing what the trafficker says is the only thing that they can do, right? And then it creates this cycle of violence. But in terms of Hartley House, we serve survivors of human sex trafficking if they are from Frederick County, or if the trafficking occurred in Frederick County. So that individual doesn't have to be from Frederick County in order for them to seek our services. And then if that person isn't from Frederick County, or the sex trafficking did not occur in Frederick County, then I would urge individuals to look onto the right side of the screen and look at the phone number, the text, and the live chat information there. That is the Human Trafficking Hotline organization, where individuals can speak to a trained professional and get services catered specifically towards the needs of that survivor and where they are currently. And then the last victimization that we're going to be talking about today is child abuse. And so child abuse is any recent act or failure to act on the part of a parent or caretaker, which results in death, serious physical or emotional harm, sexual abuse or exploitation, or an act or failure to act which presents an imminent risk of serious harm. And so an important thing to say here is that Hartley House supports survivors if the abuse occurred in the past as well. So if this is an individual who is over the age of 18, is 40, anywhere in between, but they experienced child abuse in their childhood, they are still open to our services. And again, those services are free and confidential. Okay, so a lot of people, when they think of Hartley House, they think that we are just a shelter for victims of domestic violence, and specifically women and children. but that is not the case. So we have many different types of comprehensive services, which I discussed a little bit before, and what we're going to go into depth during the later portion of this program. So, like I've been saying, we support any survivor, no matter their race, ethnicity, age, gender identity, sexual orientation, or income status, who is a survivor of intimate partner violence, sexual assault, child abuse, and human sex trafficking. And our emergency shelter is open to anyone who is in immediate physical danger of intimate partner violence. So this includes men, women, trans individuals, non-binary individuals, and children. They can all stay in our shelter and receive our services. And so you might be thinking, well, if individuals, have different identities, then they may experience forms of violence in different ways. And we would say, yes, that's definitely the case. And to keep that or push that even further, it's important to remember that every survivor's experience is different. And so on the next slide, we're going to be talking about two different types of survivors that we might work with during the course of their situation. So with client A, we have a client who may be in middle class, they may have a stable job and have a large support network. Maybe they have extended family and friends that live in the area. So that client may only need to receive counseling services after they have left their abuser. And because they have a stable job, they're able to afford their own place and stay safe from their abuser. And therefore, their time with Hartley House may be limited just to those counseling services because that's what they need most during that time. And that's completely okay. But then we can also have clients who look more similar to client B. And this could be, a client who may have a history of homelessness. And they may struggle with an addiction, and that may go hand in hand with the homelessness that they've experienced in the past. And on top of that, because of maybe the homelessness or their struggles with addiction, they may not have as much support as client A does, or maybe they don't live near their family or where they grew up, and therefore it's hard to get in touch and have that support in person. And so therefore, they may need more services from us. They may need to come to our shelter, but they may leave that shelter, stay early, and go back to their abuser. And then after a while, they may come back a year later and then stay in our program. And so as we can see, client A has a lot more support and can focus on healing without the barriers that client B is currently facing. And so no matter how a client comes to Hartley House or how they leave, we support and trust that they are doing what is right for them in that situation. And we'll talk more about trauma-informed care, but just a little basic overview of trauma-informed care is that we follow the client's lead. The client is the expert of their own situation, and so they know what's best for that situation. They know the coping strategies that they can utilize during their time, and they know what's in their capacity to work on in that moment. So as I said before, client A may be ready to focus on that emotional work. They may be ready to do those counseling services because those additional barriers aren't in front of them, right? They've got their basic needs met. They've got stable housing. They have, they probably have, necessities met. They have food taken care of, things of that nature. Whereas client B might not have that experience. They might really just be working on meeting those basic needs, and that counseling piece might not be available to them at this time. Either way, we follow what the client is in need of during that time. We follow their lead and we allow them to make those choices. And now for a little bit of the presentation, I'm going to hand it over to my co-facilitator, Allie. She's going to do a more in-depth dive. There we go. An in-depth dive of the services we have at Hartley House.
Thank you so much, Caroline. And I do want to just reiterate, all of our services are free of charge, with one caveat, which I will discuss later. But now that everyone is familiar with who our clients are, what they have experienced, we will now discuss the services that are available to them if they choose to go forward with the comprehensive services that we provide. So our first client service is our crisis service department. So this includes our 24-hour hotline, which is open to anyone, and it is completely confidential with the exception of any reports of child abuse, threats of harm to yourself or to another person. So those are the only caveats to our confidentiality, but anything else said is kept confidential. So our 24-hour hotline is operated by trained crisis workers who can provide support, crisis intervention, help with safety planning, resources, whatever they kind of need during that phone call. And they are also able to do an intake so that the client is now in our system and is able to request our other services. So our hotline is really the first step into getting in touch with potential clients and figuring out what kind of needs that they have and what services are appropriate for them at this time. Now, we also do in-person crisis intervention appointments during COVID, and currently we are still holding those over a virtual platform, but this is a more intensive safety planning, resource heavy, one-on-one experience for that client if they so choose that is a better fit for them. And really our crisis services is just the kind of first stop for any survivor seeking our services. So it's a great way to get connected. And I will also say, if you are a person who is a secondary survivor, so the primary survivor was maybe a friend of yours, a child of yours, a parent, whomever that person was to you or is to you, anyone can also call our hotline who is a secondary survivor and receive support and services. So now that we have covered our crisis services, I will move on to medical accompaniment. So our medical accompaniment program is made up of several trained advocates who provide clients support and assistance during a forensic exam at the Frederick Health Hospital. So we assist clients who are undergoing a SAFE exam, which is a sexual assault forensic exam, as well as a domestic violence forensic exam. So we are able to have advocates present at both of those examinations if the client chooses that avenue. Though those medical accompaniment advocates provide in-person support, they give resources, crisis intervention, help with grounding, and just really provide on-site support and are there as long as the client wants them to be. And then those medical accompaniment advocates will reach out at a later date after the examination to see if that client wants to continue their services with us or just need any extra support. Our clients who are receiving forensic exams either call us first and we assist them through the whole process of getting to Frederick Health Hospital, or Frederick Health Hospital calls us and we are asked to come in and support that client through that examination if that client wants us to. So again, going back to meeting the client where they are, we never decide for the client what they need. If they are, wanting our medical accompaniment advocate there for part of it, and then they don't want them for another part, we listen to them and their needs at that moment. And if they choose to not go through with our services after the examination, again, we respect where they are in their healing process, and we always let them know that we're going to be there for them no matter what. But if they choose, to not want our services, we are completely fine with that. And it's important to note, especially with our MA program, our medical accompaniment advocates are on call. So in case something happens off hours or a client is in need in the middle of the night, there's always someone who is able to respond and support that client. And next, I will talk about our emergency shelter. So this is probably the service that everyone thinks of when they think of Hartley House. So it really is a short-term shelter program. Our client's stay is about a 40-day, but we are flexible with that depending on the client's needs. Some clients stay longer, some clients stay for half the time. It really just depends on where they're at and what they need at that time. Our shelter has remained open throughout the pandemic. We have provided offsite housing through hotel partnerships and things like that. So, we've been able to keep our clients safe no matter, the highs and lows of the pandemic. But our shelter is specifically for any individual in Frederick County who is in immediate physical danger of intimate partner violence. And when someone is requesting our shelter, they will call our hotline, and then that client will be connected to our shelter staff, who will do an intake interview with them to see if they are eligible and appropriate for our shelter, and then safety plan with them about getting into the shelter, what their needs will be, and how to kind of arrange that for them and their children or whomever is coming into our facility. And like Caroline said before, our shelter is open to any victim or survivor, no matter their gender or orientation or income status or immigration status. If you are in danger of an intimate partner violence experience, our shelter is open to you. Of course, being a Frederick County resident. So again, the way to request any of our services, especially our shelter, is through calling our 24-hour hotline. And I should also mention, while someone is staying in our shelter, they will work with a service coordinator to help them with any of their housing, employment, transportation needs, anything like that that person needs at that moment, they are able to assist with. And the next slide just shows kind of a great visual of what the amount of clients that actually stay in our shelter versus those who do not. Again, our shelter is a life-saving service and it should never be undermined. But I think when people look at Hartley House as a whole, we want to start making sure that people see us as more than just a shelter. We also provide all of these other comprehensive services. And in reality, a small number of our clients actually come into our shelter. Again, it's a life-saving and wildly important service, but it's not the only thing that we do. Okay. So next we have our counseling services. Our counseling department provides both individual one-on-one counseling for adults and children, as well as specialized groups, depending on the type of experience that our clients have had. Those groups can both be open, meaning that anyone can join at any time. They're an ongoing rolling group, or they will be closed, meaning that a client would have to put in a request to join the group. They would be screened for their appropriateness for the group, and then that group would only be held for a certain amount of weeks on a certain day. So we offer a lot of different types of groups. Those are all found on our website, and we really try and cater it to what our clients are needing at that time. And all of these groups and both our as well as our individual counseling has all been held virtually during pandemic. Hopefully one day we'll get back to in person, but we have been able to transition those spaces to a virtual platform that is still confidential and safe for our participants. And lastly, we have an abuse intervention program. This is the only service that we actually charge for, and this program is specific for perpetrators of abuse. So our AIP program, our clients usually come to us through court order, or they come voluntarily. It's really just a space for perpetrators of violence to come together to, learn more about why they act, why that behavior is happening, how to move forward, how to become better partners, and really, dig deep and find a community with people who want to be better for themselves and for their partners. So again, our abuse intervention program, our clients can reach us through our hotline and request that service. They will do an intake over the phone with a crisis worker, and then they'll be in touch with the group facilitator. And then they'll go from there to see if they're appropriate for that group. So those are all of our counseling services. Next, we have our legal services. So our legal team provides free legal representation and advocacy for our clients. They mostly focus on peace and protective orders, which might be called a restraining order in other places. But they do also handle a few amounts of family law cases, meaning like custody or divorce. But they really focus heavily on the protective and peace order side of things. And aside from our legal representation, we also have legal advocates who can accompany our clients during their court process and support them in those spaces, and also help them just navigate the legal system. And we also do have a bilingual legal advocate to help our non-English speaking clients. So next we have our community-based services department. This is our newest department, and really the goal of this department is to make Hartley House services more accessible to everyone in Frederick County. This is by utilizing off-site locations throughout the county to meet clients where they are. And our first off-site location has been set up in Lucas Village. And it's really just allowing clients and potential clients to learn more about our services and not have to, jump through so many hoops. So we also partner with other community agencies that kind of go hand in hand with our mission and allow those clients to receive multiple types of service all at one time. And our crisis coordinators who are on site are able to aid with crisis intervention, support, resources, and ultimately can help connect those clients to our other services. We really hope to continue growing this department and find more locations as time goes on and make a Hartley House accessible to everyone in Frederick County. Next is our child sex trafficking regional navigator. Our regional navigator works with at-risk youth and any survivor of human trafficking that is under the age of 14. Our regional navigator works with other navigators throughout the state to provide services and resources to our clients, while also providing support and crisis intervention and trying to meet the needs of that client however best they can. And lastly, we have our engagement, prevention, and development. So we provide the trainings and education such as this one to the community, our local businesses, schools, and other agencies throughout Frederick County. We're really trying to educate the community about our services, the types of violence our clients are experiencing, and hopefully helping prevent future violence throughout Frederick County. So If your business, agency, group is interested in having the training, please let us know. We'll have some contact information towards the end of this program, and we are happy to provide any trainings that you're interested in. We have them listed on our website, but we'll also have a slide later on listing a couple of them. So a great way to also engage with our services and learn more about our mission is through our social media. If you are on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok even, we have accounts on all of those platforms, and it's a great way to learn more and just find out more about Hartley House. So I'm going to switch it back over to my co-facilitator, Caroline.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Allie. I appreciate that. But now we're just going to go into what exactly does trauma-informed care mean, and how does Hartley House take a trauma-informed care approach to all of the services that Allie just discussed. So what is trauma-informed care? It's an approach that assumes an individual is more likely than not to have a history of trauma. And so it recognizes the presence of trauma symptoms and acknowledges the role trauma may play in an individual's life. So when we have survivors and they are in our services, everyone is not only trained in what trauma reactions can look like in survivors. And like I said, every survivor experience is different. And that means every survivor's reactions may be different. So there's a wide range of trauma reactions that can occur, but when they do occur, our employees can, identify those reactions and can then use empathy and understanding and some, education to our clients to say, hey, maybe you're feeling this way because, it is a known trauma reaction, or to not get frustrated at a survivor if they are behaving in a certain way. For example, a lot of survivors may distrust a lot of individuals because the form of violence that they have endured or gone through gives them that sense of mistrust to a person that they were supposed to trust or love or confide in. So our employees know that, and we know that trust may take longer to form with these individuals, and that is completely okay and understandable. So we come at it from a sense of empathy and understanding. And then in this way, we meet clients where they are at. So if we go back a couple slides to that, client A, client B slide, when it comes to client B or client 2, I think it was labeled client B, we can understand why a survivor may be in shelter, but then leave early or terminate early, right? We understand the trauma reactions that may be going on for that survivor that may make them feel like they have to leave and go back to the abuser, right? And, again, we come at it from an empowerment approach. So we're going to allow that survivor to do what they think is best, and we're not going to tell them what to do or what we think is best. Because when an individual is in an abusive situation, and specifically an intimate partner violence situation, their abuser is already telling them what they need to do, right? And so we don't want to mimic the abuser's behavior. We want to empower the survivor to, take the form of care that they think is best. There we go. And so how can survivors connect with us? Like Allie said before, the best way to connect with Hartley House and our services is by calling that 24/7 hotline at 301-662-8800. So clients can call. They can call with questions about our services, get connected to our services, or call if they are in crisis. We just ask that if individuals are not in crisis and are just inquiring about services or questions they may have, that they call between the hours of 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. and to leave the overnight hours specifically for survivors who may be in crisis. Also, what Ali said as well, survivor supporters or secondary survivors can also call our hotline and get services. So if you are a secondary survivor, again, feel free to call that line as well. And then lastly, you may not be a survivor or a survivor supporter, but you may still want to get involved with Hartley House. Thank you, first of all, that's wonderful. And there's many ways that you can do that. So you can join our mailing list. And in order to receive the mailing list or to get there, you can go to www.hartleyhouse.org, go to our main page, which it should take you there already. Scroll down all the way to the bottom. There's going to be like a yellow little rectangle that I believe says newsletter sign up. And then you could go ahead and click on that, put in your information, and then you will join our mailing list. The next way you can do that is follow us on social media, share, like, comment on our posts, and you can find us on all of the social medias at Hartley House. We're on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, everything. And then lastly, you can invite us, Hartley House members, to provide a training to your group or organization. And you can do so by emailing engage@hartleyhouse.org. And on the next slide, Ali will go into the different kinds of trainings that we can provide.
Thanks, Caroline. So here's just a quick list of presentations that we are able to provide to groups. So Hartley House 101, this presentation, we can come in person. Our Intimate Partner Violence 101, Emotional Abuse, which is our Intimate Partner Violence 201, just doing a deeper dive into the emotional abuse side of things. We have a presentation about financial abuse as it relates to intimate partner violence. We have a presentation about healthy relationships, human trafficking 101, sexual assault 101, stalking 101, and a presentation specifically about teen dating violence for adults who serve youth. So if any of these sound interesting to you, please feel free to reach out and email us at engage@hartleyhouse.org. And lastly, just to wrap up, we want to remind you, Hartley House is the only provider of comprehensive services for survivors of intimate partner violence, sexual violence, child abuse, and human trafficking in Frederick County. We are so much more than a shelter, and we are open to everyone, no matter their identity, income status, immigration status, race, ethnicity, gender. We're open and here for you if you are a survivor. And lastly, our services are all free and confidential with the exception of any reports of child abuse, threats of homicide or suicide. Our 24-hour hotline is the best way to get in touch with all of our services. And please know that we have an ability to connect to a language line, and we are able to connect to that translation service to meet any caller who is not an English speaker on our hotline. You can reach out to us via our hotline number or through our website at hartleyhouse.org. You can also connect with us directly by emailing us at engage@hartleyhouse.org. Thank you so much for being here and watching this presentation. Feel free to email us with any questions you might have. Thank you and have a great day.